That's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Thought I'd try a new angle today. Don't know if it's any better or not. And figure to get another angle of my house before I have to move. That's a bit too personal, but you'll eventually see a change in scenery, so. Hello. Welcome back. I'm a witcher. I'm not a witcher. But I am talking about The Witcher today. With Season of Storms, which was actually a novel written way after the fact, probably because the games were getting popular. And so Andrei Tarkovsky decided to write another one. And it is a story set, I kind of hear different things on the internet, but generally I hear it is after The Last Wish, but before Sword and Destiny, so somewhere in there. Now also we're in a region that's never explored in the video games or the books prior. Though I think it was explained fairly early on that eventually the area that Geralt is in will go on to be kind of consumed by other kingdoms, and so that's why you don't hear about it as its own place. You know, kind of like the United States, and now there's 50 states, but there wasn't always 50 states, but they became, you know, so I guess kind of like that. I think it started out really strong. The first 100 to 200 pages, totally into it. And then it kind of just meanders, drags and dithers. I don't want to say it's bad because it's still written well, and I know it's a translation, so I'll never get the full effect unless I learn Polish. But it was solid. The prose are solid. The issue comes in. Geralt gets to this location, he loses his swords, and most of the book is him just trying to acquire it back. And in the meantime from that, we basically have the short story format of like The Last Wish, but it's not a short story. It is just side quest after side quest after side quest, like a video game, with no real relation to the main plot. And they don't really connect to one another. You know, it could have been cool if it was kind of like a cascading effect of point A to point B to point C to point D, but all of it felt really random. And it got to a point where, look, this is no Shadow of the Torturer. This is no Malazan Book of the Fallen. I lost track of what was even happening near the end. Because you would go from one adventure to the next with no seeming cohesion between any of it. So it got confusing. And boring, to be frank. Some of these ideas and stuff in there were interesting, but by and large, it was not... There's nice little moments, I should say, with like Geralt, and it's not like it's going to give you any new revelations on who this character should be, as most of his character development, I assume, would have to happen in the mainline books. But there's enough there to, you know, kind of get a greater understanding of the character. Dandelion is also there, though a lot of the humor and the camaraderie that was in, you know, The Last Wish, which of course is the only reference point I really have, wasn't there as strongly. And I mean, they're still friends, but it just didn't vibe the same as it did before. We get introduced to a new sorceress named Coral, Lita Need. She was pretty interesting, a different foil from Triss or Yennefer. But again, by and large, I think this just went on far too long. Could have trimmed like 100 pages down, made those short stories connect better. Because it wasn't a short story. That's the thing. That's the thing. The Last Wish works because the present day plot is Geralt recovering in this like monastery, church, whatever sort of place, talking to this lady. And then in between all that, we get little flashbacks to his past, different adventures that he went on. That works. But if you're going to have this be all present day, you're going to have all this happening, it needs to be cohesive and fit together, but none of it really does. And so it's just really frustrating. And I feel like the oomph it had in the first half just really got drowned out. But the second half just really left a bad taste in my mouth. This is a certain case of the author had written everything that he kind of wanted to write. And then he allowed fan fiction essentially to be written for his books in the form of video games. And those video games get popular. So he decides, okay, I'll write another book so I can get more money. I mean, it makes sense. I'm speculating. But it's also feel like, did you really want to tell this story? Because honestly, a bit of it feels like filler. I don't know. I mean, of course, if it's going to be an integral, it's going to be filler. By and large, it's the nature of it. But there are ways to do that right. And I don't feel like it was done here in the second half of the book. That or he just doesn't know how to do pacing in a normal story format. I don't know. I have to see his mainline novels to judge. But, I mean, any Witcher fan, from what I can tell, would tell you this is not his best work. And most people would have read this last. But what a way to end it on this note. I will say there's an epilogue that is written very beautifully. And I looked it up because, of course, I'm reading this in chronological order. So the character who pops up at the end is a character who pops up, I think, in the final novel of The Witcher. I could be wrong. And so it's kind of like a full circle moment. But Diamonds Within a Rough Cut is not necessarily going to make the books a top tier book for me just because it has a nice soliloquy or nice ending to tie into his actual ending, and be like George Lucas's poetry, it rhymes, but it doesn't save the rest of it. And I don't mean to be negative. I'm not saying it's bad by any means. It's written well. I wouldn't even claim it's a bad book, but it is certainly a weaker book than the last, and I imagine weaker than the rest of his work. I won't even say it's a great book. Maybe not even a good book. It's fine. I don't know. Personally, me speaking. Of course, if you're a Witcher fan, should you read it? I mean, yeah. Would I suggest this be your first foray into anything? No. Not one bit. Do not start with this. But also, like, I don't like the cover. Just to be a little petty, it just has Geralt with a beard, which he has in The Witcher 3. I don't think that's the author's fault. It's just publishing and everything. But I think it was a bad decision to do so. I don't like it whatsoever. At least in the version I have. It's just The Witcher 3. And it's annoying. But yeah. It was fine overall. It started off really strong. You'll notice this too when I'm not particularly fond of a book, right? Like I have videos that go like 40 minutes, sometimes 50, when I'm really invested, and then when I don't care, they tend to be much shorter because it's harder for me to. And maybe this is why I'm a bad reviewer, in which case I don't know why people watch me. But it's hard for me to take the time to dissect a series, because I don't want to hate on something. I don't want to be a negative Nancy. I don't want to be a hater on YouTube and I already have this infamous scene of me back when I read the Bounty Hunter Wars trilogy in Star Wars, and I was so mad. I felt like I wasted so much of my time, with the limited time I have on this planet, reading that trilogy, that by the end of the trilogy, I picked up my book, and I chucked it against the wall. It's a very funny moment, but I would probably be less harsh on a reread, just to be more respectful. But that being said, you know, I don't like to be, so that's why I'm not gonna like deep dive and really really complain about it. I don't want to do that to anybody. But by and large, I was not a fan of this one. And I knew that going in, that it was not particularly people's favorites. But people generally looked on it positively, and I just can't for the life of me. I mean, I get it, but I also don't. Like, the writing is solid in here. And the first half is very strong to me. But it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And it's too much. I don't get to live forever. If I did, I could take all the time in the world reading books, but I don't. And so, apathy is death, as Kreia says in Knights of the Old Republic 2. And the book isn't bad enough for me to absolutely, totally despise it, but it's not great either. Bordering on fine to neutral. And apathy is death, and when you make me feel apathetic, you have done something wrong. Anyway, that being said, I look forward to getting on to Sword and Destiny, the second short story collection series before the mainline entries of The Witcher, before diving into the games themselves. So I hope you all join me for that. I'm getting to spoilers. If you've read this book before, don't care about spoilers, you can stick around, otherwise there's the door. I don't have too much to say. We'll talk about a little bit of it. It is interesting in the story, I feel like more so than Last Wish, we get a bit more of Geralt's inner monologue. So we get to, again, there's no new revelations here, but getting to be in Geralt's head a bit more just makes it a little bit more intimate in understanding him. We're in Carrick, again, a place that doesn't exist by the time of the mainline novels, at least, or probably, or the games. Geralt is found guilty of this crime. We later learn it's all this elaborate thing done by Corl, but at the time, he gets arrested. But we do learn that he studied law before, so he kind of knows stuff about that, which I just thought is interesting that he knows that. And then we meet Leda, aka Corl. We also get some other world-building things in that, I guess, Dandelion as a cousin. Because Ferrant de Latin Hove, who's like, what is he, like he's somebody important in the politics of this place, and he's a cousin to Dandelion. It also seems to be about a year or so, give or take, since Geralt has seen Yennefer. And then 4 days pass, and Geralt and Corl have sex, because it wouldn't be Witcher without horniness. And then again, we start getting all these like side tangent. Honestly, I got so upset. I'm not gonna dive into every single little side adventure that he goes on in this book, because it pissed me off that it just had like no cohesion and just kind of like things just kept happening. I mean, there are connecting threads if you want to dissect it, but nothing flows well together. The first thing, the Witcher is interrogated by these, because the main thing is this like political intrigue basically between these different sorcerers, wizards, sorceresses, right? Because there's this demon on the loose or something, and whatever. And so the Witcher learns that we learn the Witcher has previously killed, at least as far as this story is concerned, 2 demons. And there's some interesting discussions there, as the sorcerers, kind of say, like, you don't kill humans, right? You usually don't kill humans, you kill monsters only. So how's that work inside your philosophy? Trying to like catch them at a contradiction, kind of like, never mind, I had something, I lost it. But, so he, kind of defends himself, like, well, it was possessing them, like there was nothing, like I had to kill them. So I thought that was interesting. Also, that demons still exist in this world. This is also the first time at least that I'm reading, chronologically speaking, that the term conjunction of the spears happens, which is interesting. Again, I hate to be that guy. It just so happens that I literally didn't even plan it, but I'm coinciding Elric with these Witcher books. Conjunction of the spears, which has to do with different planes of existence, which you could argue are dimensions / universes. And there's a very similar name in Elric about multiverse shenanigans. So, ding, ding, ding. Another little note that I just wanted to make. But it was interesting, that conversation. We also, again, it's a little silly thing, but it's a nice little addition to Geralt's character that we kind of learn. I mean, portals, and this is probably in other stories too, but for me, it became really apparent that for Geralt, in much the same way that Indiana Jones is afraid of snakes, Geralt is afraid of portals. It's kind of a similar thing, right? In terms of magic in this world is to a certain extent like a science. And wizards and other magic users have become pretty efficient at making portals. They are genuinely effective and reliable. Snakes are not inherently dangerous, right? They attack when they feel threatened primarily or when they're hungry, but they usually go after prey they think they can succeed in eating, right? And so having a fear of snakes is rational but also irrational, because you most likely are not going to get bit by a snake unless you live in a region with snakes, and even then, do you have an infestation, or are you just afraid that you're going to bump into one and they're going to bite you? Because most likely they don't want to deal with you, right? But that's Indiana Jones' biggest fear, which is, again, a bit logical, because snakes can be dangerous. In the same way, though, with portals, they're not necessarily dangerous, but they definitely can be if they're done wrong. So every time Geralt goes through one, or has to go through one, or sees one, he gets nervous, which I just think is a nice little character bite. Also, another thing I liked, and it's probably one of the last things I wrote, is that anxiety and fear, good for you, so long as you don't yield to it. Again, this is another thing that was kind of like a thought bubble that The Witcher had, which I thought was a nice little thing there, to think that every time that in the future stories, as we read through them and through the video games, that Geralt is scared, that he is filled with anxiety. He just doesn't let it overwhelm him. And I like that little bit of, that he's not just stoic, that he can't just handle everything, that it's all a Tuesday for him, even though it kind of is, because that's his job. But every time he goes into these battles, he is scared, but he powers through that fear anyway. I like that little character growth, or character bite we learn. But it was somewhere around here where we started getting a bunch of different side plots, and I just really started to get upset. And I almost forgot what the main plot was because of all the sidetrack and dithering and blah, 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 blah. What is cool is that by the end, Yennefer does show up, and she does help out. I read all of Steven Erikson's Malazan Book of the Fallen, and it's funny because Yennefer does a lot of stuff she does in this book by the end unwitnessed. Like, Geralt doesn't realize it's because of Yennefer, but kind of everything goes right for him by the end of the story, and it's all thanks to Yennefer, who remains unwitnessed and unknown, but she does the good things anyway, which again speaks to their relationship, which we'll see in the mainline books, and is maybe another reason why you should pick her in the video games, because she didn't have to do this, and she didn't do it for brownie points with him, because you'll never know that in this particular instance she had a hand in it. So I kind of like that. And again, and the epilogue was written even without the proper context for it. It was beautifully, probably one of my favorite parts of the book was the epilogue. But again, it will have bigger significance if you're reading this publication-wise, because I guess, as I looked up, it has to do with a character from the final book, or something like that. And so it kind of like comes full circle. But yeah, I'd have more to say if I was happy about it, but I'm not particularly thrilled with it. But those are overall my thoughts. And if you enjoyed this book a lot, please let me know why in the comment section below. And yeah, I look forward to talking about more Witcher. I don't know if I'll like all of them, but I did really like The Last Wish, and if anything, it does really make me want to commit to the games, because I played 10 hours of 3, never finished it. I've watched a Let's Play when it came out of The Witcher 2, and I'm vaguely familiar with The Witcher 1, so I'm not very big on the video games, but I would like to change that someday. But I would like all the context of the books first. That was my my promise to myself. If I was ever going to read, or if I was ever going to play The Witcher, I had to read the books first. So that's it for now. Till next time. I don't know. Toss a coin to your Witcher. O Valley of Plenty. O Valley of Plenty. Till next time.